Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time, as we wrap up Wednesday, 7th May 2025. Let's see what stories are unfolding around us. India-Pakistan conflict. Annihilation. Tensions have surged between India and Pakistan after a terrorist attack in Kashmir, resulting in 26 deaths. India retaliated with strikes on targets in Pakistan, and Pakistan administered Kashmir under Operation Sindoor. India asserts that the group behind the Kashmir attack is supported by Pakistan, a claim Pakistan vehemently denies. The Indian government declared it held Pakistan accountable for the attack and would avenge the deaths. India maintains that the strikes were restrained, targeting no civilian, economic, or military sites, but resulted in at least 26 casualties. Pakistan condemned the strikes as a provocation and vowed a response at its own discretion. Pakistan claims to have downed 5 Indian fighter jets, with reports confirming at least 2 crashes. Both Indian and Pakistani forces are engaged in attacks across the disputed Kashmir frontier, escalating the military confrontation. The conflict has disrupted international air travel, forcing airlines to reroute or cancel flights. Numerous nations are urging restraint and offering mediation, with the U.S. calling for de-escalation. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is monitoring the situation, and China described the strikes as regrettable. U.S. President Donald Trump expressed hope for a swift resolution. India's Home Ministry has initiated air raid siren tests and civilian training for blackouts and evacuations, marking preparations unseen in decades amid the looming threat of conflict with Pakistan. Turning to India, the government moved to recover ancient gem relics connected to Buddha's remains, halting their auction in Hong Kong. Sotheby's postponed the sale following a threat of legal action from the Culture Ministry, who deemed the sale illegal. India and the UK finalized a trade deal after 3 years of negotiations intended to reinforce alliances. Data reveals that about 77% of Indians possess a bachelor's degree or higher, placing them second only to Taiwanese, 83%, among Asian Americans. In the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer has stated that the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan is of serious concern for many across Britain, with the government encouraging de-escalation. Finally, increasing Western military support to India, coupled with China's support for Pakistan, indicates a shift in global alignments and presents, another potential flashpoint for international tensions. China. Xi Jinping's 4-day visit to Moscow, including attending Russia's Victory Day parade and talks with Vladimir Putin, may strain relations with Europe amid the war in Ukraine. During the visit, Xi thanked Moscow for its support on Taiwan, as Beijing implemented measures to defend against US tariffs. The visit underscored the growing friendship between China and the Kremlin, while Beijing seeks closer ties with Europe. Asia's largest economies have approved an emergency financing tool using the yuan and other local currencies. A Canadian CEO is circumventing us middlemen by establishing direct ties with China due to supply chain issues arising from US tariffs. Bitcoin saw gains as crypto investors anticipate positive U.S.-China trade talks, following the announcement that the U.S. Treasury Secretary and Trade Representative will meet with the Chinese government in Switzerland. Russia. Jinping of China spent 4 days in Moscow, attending the Victory Day parade and engaging in discussions with Vladimir Putin. This visit occurred as Ukrainian drones targeted Moscow, with air defenses reportedly destroying 19 drones. Russia hosted leaders from China and Brazil to mark the 80th anniversary of its World War II victory. Expressing deep concern over the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan, Russia condemned acts of terrorism as stated by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, who called for a unified global effort against terrorism. A Russian missile and drone attack on Kyiv, Ukraine, resulted in at least 2 deaths. Russia and Ukraine exchanged strikes before Moscow's Victory Day parade, with a drone explosion reported during a Russian strike in Kyiv. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un urged increased artillery shell production to support Russia's war in Ukraine. The populist leader of Slovakia rejected the EU plan to hold Russian natural gas imports by 2027, aimed at reducing revenue for Vladimir Putin's war efforts in Ukraine. The US indicated that Russia is demanding too much in concessions to end the war in Ukraine. United States. Joe Biden accused Donald Trump of modern-day appeasement towards Russia, stating Trump believes Russia has historical rights to Ukraine. Biden fears Europe would lose confidence in America if Trump's proposed concessions to Russia were implemented. Britain is negotiating with US officials about Trump's proposed 100% tariff on movies produced outside the US to protect its creative industries. US intelligence agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency, were directed to focus spying activities on Greenland, reflecting Donald Trump's interest in acquiring the territory. Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence, issued the directive. Novo Nordisk, the maker of Wegovy, lowered its profit forecast due to slower-than-expected sales in the U.S., raising concerns about market share loss to rival Eli Lilly. A federal judge in Boston is considering whether non-citizens have the same free speech protections as our citizens. Donald Trump planned to announce that the U.S. will refer to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf or the Gulf of Arabia. Trump vowed seamless travel for foreign fans during the World Cup 2026, amid concerns that the tournament could be affected by US president's immigration policies and tensions with co-hosts Canada and Mexico. Trump says 3 hostages died in Gaza, 21 believed to be alive, leading to confusion over Gaza hostages as US president contradicts Israeli figures. The U.S. Supreme Court allowed Trump's transgender military ban to take effect, potentially triggering the discharge of thousands of transgender troops. Trump says us to stop bombing Yemen's Houthis after rebels pledged to end shipping attacks, and Oman confirms ceasefire reached. Reports indicated the Trump administration planned to deport migrants to Libya, despite State Department concerns about life-threatening prison conditions. The U.S. agreed to a ceasefire with Yemen's Houthis after the group pledged to stop targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Ukraine. A Russian drone strike on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant caused tens of millions worth of damage to the containment structure. Western governments are likely to bear the repair costs, estimated to exceed the €25 available in an international contingency fund. A Russian missile and drone attack on Kyiv resulted in at least 2 deaths. Russia and Ukraine exchanged strikes before Moscow's Victory Day parade, with a drone explosion reported during a Russian strike in Kyiv. United Kingdom, a pro-Russian hacking group, Anonymity 5716, claimed responsibility for targeting several UK websites, including local councils, resulting in temporary inaccessibility, but the attacks were not fully successful. Britain is in discussions with US officials about Trump's proposed 100% tariff on movies produced outside the US to protect its creative industries. The UK's Creative Industries Minister, Chris Bryant, stated that losses from Trump's film tariffs will be on the US side. Yemen. The US agreed to a ceasefire with Yemen's Houthis after the group pledged to stop targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The announcement came after Israel claimed its jets disabled Yemen's main airport in retaliation for a missile strike near Tel Aviv. Libya. Reports indicated the Trump administration planned to deport migrants to Libya, despite State Department concerns about life-threatening prison conditions. Libya's provisional government denied these reports. India and Pakistan. Russia expressed deep concern regarding the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan, condemning acts of terrorism. Maria Zakharova, Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson, emphasized the need for a united global effort to combat terrorism. China has implemented economic measures to counter trade tensions with the United States, including cutting interest rates and injecting liquidity into the banking system by lowering the reserve requirement ratio for banks and releasing 1 trillion yuan. These actions aim to strengthen China's position ahead of trade talks, with the U.S. high-level trade talks between the U.S. and China are scheduled to occur in Switzerland. Beijing has cautioned Washington against using these talks to increase pressure on China, while also rolling out a policy package to guard against the impact of U.S. tariffs. The trade war between the U.S. and China is impacting global trade, leading to plunging fees and fewer services on major maritime routes. Container shipments between the two countries are declining due to tariffs. The U.S. tariff policy targeting low-value parcels from China has disrupted cross-border e-commerce, forcing platforms like Temu and Shein to adjust their logistics strategies. China's AI market is projected to grow to $50 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. However, tightening restrictions on semiconductor access for companies like NVIDIA could harm U.S. national security, according to NVIDIA's CEO. AMD also anticipates a $1.50 billion sales hit due to export restrictions on its Mi-308 chips. China is focused on equity and shared development outcomes. China is developing a jammer to target a ghost fleet of warships with missiles. The nation has expressed regret regarding India's military operation and has urged both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint amid escalating tension. President Jinping met with Russia, expressing gratitude for Moscow's stance on Taiwan, reiterating that the island's unification must be upheld as part of the post-war international order. He also welcomed a new chapter for China-Germany ties in congratulating Friedrich Merz. China is expected to release a movie about the Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731 this summer. The country has revised its infectious disease law to better protect individual rights, with the updated law set to take effect on September 1. China's TSA sees streamlining IPOs as part of a broader effort to open its market amid the trade war. Shifting focus to the United States, it is imperative for the nation to secure a supply of critical minerals independent of China. The U.S. is urged to adopt a slow and steady approach to North Korea to resolve the nuclear stalemate. A U.S. House hearing was triggered by suspected Chinese surveillance sites in Cuba. Finally, Morocco's role as a connector country between Europe and China is becoming precarious due to the trade war. While Morocco is linked to Europe through its auto sector and trade pact, China is investing in Moroccan factories. Germany now sees Friedrich Merz as its new chancellor, replacing Olaf Scholz after an initial unsuccessful bid, an unusual start that could undermine his administration. Prioritizing foreign affairs, Merz will visit Warsaw and Paris. His aim is to strengthen European unity and collaborate with Poland and France in support of Ukraine, and to counteract potential tariffs from Donald Trump, amidst pressure from Trump and Vladimir Putin on the UI. He wants to give the relationship fresh momentum at a critical moment. Within Germany, Merz contends with challenges, including a threat from the far right. His government intends to strengthen migration policies by deploying up to 3,000 more officers to Germany's borders to turn away undocumented migrants. Concerns have surfaced regarding the weakening of Germany's tradition of remembrance, even with millions visiting the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. Tesla vehicle registrations have decreased in Germany and throughout Europe due to greater competition from European and Chinese manufacturers and growing disapproval of Elon Musk's political activities. Investment plans of surveyed firms also remain strong, and many are isolating their operations in China from US exposure, says German Chamber of Commerce in China. Japan grapples with ongoing tariff negotiations with the US, where both parties aim for an agreement but lack urgency. Japanese stocks are attracting significant investment, now accounting for 24% of the Orbi International Equity Fund, up from 10% 4 months earlier. Mitsubishi UFJ is set to launch an online bank in fiscal year 2026, targeting the younger, smartphone-dependent demographic. Social challenges include potential poverty among the Ice Age employment, generation upon retirement due to low wages and pension adjustments, raising welfare risks. Regulations on online ads with sexual content provoke debate, balancing child protection with expressive freedoms. A survey reveals that 45% of Japanese workers are quiet quitting, challenging the overwork culture as they are content with minimal effort and plan to continue. Concerns remain about press freedom, with analysts suggesting journalists self-censor due to fear of government reprisal, impacting Japan's press freedom. Ranking: a knife attack on 2 passengers at a Tokyo subway station during rush hour led to the temporary suspension of the Tokyo Metro's Nambaku line. In Osaka, painting streets yellow in a red light district has reportedly reduced prostitution by 90%, as police believe the bright color enhances visibility. A 1-year-old boy was tragically found dead in a drainage ditch in western Japan, with police suspecting an accidental fall. Meanwhile, a private Japanese lunar lander is orbiting the moon, preparing for a touchdown attempt within the coming month. Turning to the United States, the U.S. Army is set to deploy a new Agile unit to Japan for joint exercises, part of a wider strategic push to establish formations in key locations around the globe. The Pentagon has already stood up 3 such formations and plans to create 2 more in the next 2 to 3 years. United Kingdom. The UK government, through the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, ARIA, is funding real-world geoengineering experiments globally to gather data on climate change solutions, including sunlight blocking and sea ice thickening. The UK and India's trade agreement, the largest since Brexit, is projected to boost the UK economy by £4 80 billion annually by 2040, reducing tariffs on British exports like cars and whiskey and lowering costs for British companies importing Indian goods. Ørsted, a Danish firm, cancelled the Hornsea 4 offshore wind farm project off the Yorkshire coast due to rising costs, impacting the UK's green energy targets. The project was intended to power 1 million homes. Asylum accommodation costs in the UK are projected to exceed £15 billion, tripling the Home Office's initial £4 50 billion estimate from 2019 contract. British activist groups reported the government sent 8,630 munitions to Israel since September. The UK has stated it stands ready to support India and Pakistan to move towards dialogue and de-escalation. India and the UK have finalized a trade agreement projected to add £4 80 billion annually to the UK economy by 2040. This agreement will significantly reduce tariffs on British cars and whiskey exported to India, while also lowering costs for British companies importing Indian clothing and food products. The UK says it stands ready to support India and Pakistan to move towards dialogue and de-escalation. Ukraine, Russia. In Eastern Europe, all 4 international airports around Moscow temporarily suspended flights as Russian forces intercepted over 100 Ukrainian drones aimed at nearly a dozen Russian regions. Hundreds of Ukrainian family members gathered to welcome loved ones returning from Russian prisons, marking both joyous reunions and moments of sorrow. US Vice President J.D. Vance has called for direct Moscow-Kyiv talks to resolve the war in Ukraine, while German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is planning a visit to Ukraine soon. Joe Biden stated that Donald Trump's pressure on Ukraine to concede territory to Russia constitutes modern-day appeasement. Now, Mirshasta, Claudia, Mandam, D. Israel-Palestine. Senior Conservative MPs and peers in the UK have urged the immediate recognition of Palestine as a state, defying the Israeli government and advocating for formal recognition prior to upcoming talks. Israel is facing intense scrutiny from UN experts who are raising alarms about the potential annihilation of Palestinians in Gaza and urging international intervention to prevent further bloodshed. Aid officials and residents describe a breakdown in law and order in Gaza, exacerbated by the ongoing Israeli blockade, leading to looting, theft, and escalating violence amidst dwindling food and essential supplies. Palestinians in Gaza City have endured repeated displacement as a result of the Israeli military offensive, further compounding the humanitarian crisis. The destruction of an Anoaya school in Gaza's al-Burari camp, which had provided shelter for displaced Palestinians, has intensified the already dire situation. Statements made by Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, suggesting a plan for the complete destruction of Gaza and the forced relocation of its Palestinian population to third countries, have ignited widespread condemnation and fears of ethnic cleansing and genocide, amplified by reports of a Security Cabinet-approved plan for the conquest of the Gaza Strip and the intention to annex the West Bank. Yemen remains a point of contention with Israel, as evidenced by an Israeli attack on Sana'a airport, causing an estimated $500 million in damages following a Houthi missile strike near Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport. Israel retaliated by bombing Yemen's main airport. The Israeli military also intercepted an unmanned vehicle, a day after President Trump announced the U.S. would reduce its involvement in the conflict with the Iran-backed Houthi group. In the United States, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, plans to discontinue a direct communications channel between U.S. diplomats in Jerusalem who focus on Palestinian issues and agencies in Washington. President Trump also stated that the U.S. would cease bombing the Houthis. India's recent Operation Sindoor involved missile strikes on May 7 targeting 9 alleged terrorist infrastructure sites within Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, including a Jaish-e-Mohammed base in Bahawalpur. India claimed the strikes were retaliation for a militant attack in Indian Kashmir that killed 26 tourists. Pakistan reported over 10 deaths and 30 injuries, condemning the strikes as a blatant act of war and vowing retaliation. The Indian operations graphic depicted spilled sindoor resembling blood, which was deemed provocative. Pakistan's response to the strikes included Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif denouncing the action as a cowardly act of war and invoking Article 51 of the UN Charter. Pakistan summoned the Indian Chargé d'Affaires in Islamabad to protest formally. Pakistan also claimed to have shot down 5 Indian Air Force jets and a drone. The strikes represent the largest Indian attack on Pakistan in over 50 years, and the most serious confrontation since 2019. According to Al Jazeera, a mosque complex in Pakistani Punjab suffered considerable damage. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is set to visit Indonesia, aiming to bolster relations between the two nations. Google is exploring the use of Google Wallet for storing identification documents. This measure is being considered to enforce Australia's upcoming social media ban for those under 16. Experts note This could aid adults with ID, but may not effectively prevent teenagers from circumventing the ban. Recipe book author Nagi Mehashi received the Illustrated Book of the Year award at the Australian Book Industry Awards for Recipes and Eats tonight. Former Greens MP Max Chandler Mather described Parliament's workplace culture as bloody awful, leading to a rebuke from Prime Minister Albanese, who called him a hypocrite. Adam Bant is projected to lose his seat in Melbourne, possibly leaving the federal Greens without a leader. On high will be manufacturing Mitsubishi EVs for both Australia and New Zealand. The Liberal Party is currently engaged in internal debates regarding its future strategy, with some senators advising against engaging in culture wars and others supporting a MAGA-style approach. Cyclist Caleb Ewan, known for his sprinting prowess, has retired after a distinguished career that included 5 stage wins at the Tour de France. Libya is currently grappling with the potential fallout from a reported U.S. plan to deport immigrants to the war-torn nation. The Trump administration allegedly intended to initiate these deportations via military flights as early as this week. Critically, both of Libya's competing governing factions, including the Tripoli-based, internationally recognized authority in the West, have refuted any arrangement to receive deportees. This development has sparked serious concern, given the widely reported horrific and deplorable conditions prevailing in Libyan migrant detention facilities. Amidst rising trade tensions, the United States saw President Donald Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney convene at the White House to address pressing issues. Despite past criticisms, Trump struck a friendly tone, even floating the idea of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state, while simultaneously expressing a wish to keep tariffs in place. In response, Canada's Prime Minister Carney flatly rejected the notion of annexation, declaring the country was not for sale. Carney further pointed out that the tariff war had driven Canada to diversify its trade relationships, noting a 6.6% decline in exports to the U.S. years, alongside a near 25% increase in exports to other nations. The Oval Office meeting also included Trump's commendation of Carney's political resurgence. South Korea is grappling with a measles outbreak, reporting 52 cases this year, a 6-year high. This surge is attributed to low vaccination rates and increased international travel. A South Korean court will hear the election violation case of presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung on June 18. Controversy surrounds dolls modeled on married women, criticized for alleged over-sexualization. Former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo endorsed Donald Trump for his experience in trade matters. Lawyers are increasingly pursuing political careers in South Korea. The ongoing trade war initiated by President Trump continues to ripple across continents, as European businesses grapple with the uncertainties created by new tariffs. The New York Times has been actively engaging with European business owners to understand the strategies they are employing to mitigate the impact of these trade policies. Meanwhile, at the Vatican, a pivotal moment approaches for the world's 1.4 billion Catholic. 133 cardinals are preparing to gather in the Sistine Chapel this week to elect a new pope. This conclave is particularly noteworthy as it marks the first time that European cardinals comprise less than half of the voting body. The selections made by Pope Francis favoring cardinals from the global south are anticipated to play a significant role in shaping the election's outcome. Sudan has announced plans to cut diplomatic relations with the United Arab Emirates, UAE, alleging that UAE supports the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in the nation's ongoing civil war, which started in April 2023. Defense Minister Yassin Ibrahim condemned the UAE's actions as a violation of Sudanese sovereignty. The city of Port Sudan, serving as the wartime capital and a haven for civilians, has been struck by drone attacks for 3 days straight. These strikes hit a fuel depot, the airport, and a hotel, marking an escalation of the conflict into a previously unaffected area. Malaysia is currently grappling with concerns over governance and potential nepotism. The Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, faces criticism for potentially elevating his daughter, Nurul Izzah, to a prominent party role. This move challenges his commitment to anti-corruption. The disappearance of Pamela Lane, allegedly abducted by individuals in police uniform while heading to the MAC, has put the anti-corruption agency under pressure. The anti-corruption chief defended the agency and claimed it was unfair to blame it for the abduction. During a recent visit, Kashmir and Malaysian officials discussed U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policies. The United States recently facilitated the relocation of 5 Venezuelan opposition leaders to its territory. These leaders had been sheltering in the Argentinian embassy in Caracas for 412 days. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio described the operation as a rescue. Furthermore, a declassified U.S. intelligence assessment contradicts claims from the Trump administration. The assessment found no connection between the Venezuelan government and the Tren de Aragua gang. Turning to Argentina, its embassy in Caracas was central to the aforementioned situation. The embassy provided refuge for the 5 Venezuelan opposition leaders for over a year. This sheltering highlights the ongoing political tensions between Argentina and Venezuela. The Argentinian government has not yet issued a formal statement following the leaders' relocation to the United States. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, the relocation of the opposition leaders marks a significant development. These leaders had sought refuge in the Argentinian embassy due to political persecution. The Venezuelan government has yet to comment on the U.S.-facilitated relocation. The incident further strains diplomatic relations between Venezuela, Argentina, and the United States. Taiwan is currently navigating complex historical narratives, recently downgrading the status of Chiang Kai-shek's mausoleum. The site is now categorized as a camp area, reflecting ongoing debates about his legacy. In economic news from Taiwan, a strengthening currency has prompted analysts to consider broader de-dollarization trends in Asia. There are also wider concerns that former President Trump's policies may have inadvertently weakened American influence in the region. Iran and Russia, facing Western sanctions, have deepened their ties via a strategic partnership agreement this year. Russian President Vladimir Putin communicated to the Iranian president Russia's aspiration for a fair U.S.-Iran nuclear deal. Turning to the United States, former President Donald Trump reportedly dismissed his national security advisor. This dismissal stemmed from allegations that the advisor was working with Israel on possible plans to bomb Iran. Italy is seeing Cardinal Pietro Parolin emerge as an early frontrunner among oddsmakers to become the next pope, following Pope Francis. The online prediction markets correctly forecasted President Trump's election. Philippines is currently embroiled in a controversy as a probe accused the Chinese embassy of influence operations, which could result in the expulsion of embassy staff and legal repercussions under a law addressing subversive acts committed during peacetime. Simultaneously, allies of ex-President Duterte, who is at risk of arrest by the ICC, are mobilizing backing for candidates aligned with Duterte, most notably Bongo, who has been gaining traction in recent polls for the Philippine Senate. Kenya recently saw 2 Belgian teenagers facing legal repercussions for wildlife violations. They were caught attempting to smuggle 5,000 ants out of the country. The ants were destined for markets in Europe and Asia. The teenagers were fined $7,700 or face a 12-month prison sentence. This penalty represents the maximum allowed under Kenya's wildlife conservation laws. The case underscores a growing concern about the trafficking of less common wildlife species. Yemen's Houthi rebels have asserted that a potential ceasefire agreement with the United States will not extend to their attacks on Israel. Former President Donald Trump declared a pause to the U.S. airstrikes, which had lasted almost 2 months and targeted the Houthis. Trump noted signs the Iran-backed rebels would de-escalate their actions in the region. The U.S. bombing campaign aimed to stop Houthi interference with international shipping. The Houthis' adherence to a cessation of these actions remains unconfirmed. In the United States, President Trump signaled a potentially strained discussion with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He specifically mentioned tough points, hinting at his administration's view that the U.S. could manage economically independent of Canadian goods. This statement arrives against a backdrop of persistent unease concerning Trump's tariff policies and their destabilizing effects on international markets. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is preparing for potentially difficult discussions with President Trump. The core of the tension stems from Trump's perspective on trade relations and tariffs. Trudeau aims to address these concerns while safeguarding Canadian economic interests. The talks are anticipated to be a key moment in defining the future of U.S.-Canada relations under the Trump administration. Poland is on edge, fearing the United States might reduce its commitment to European security amidst Trump's policies, Putin's aggression, and the continuing conflict in Ukraine. This anxiety is fueled by Poland's vulnerable location and past experiences. New Zealand witnessed a unique event as the first ever recording of a Paulafanta snail laying an egg from its neck was documented. Investigations are underway by the police regarding multiple claims of sexual abuse within the 2x2's church. More individuals are reporting allegations. In sports, a potential test match is being discussed, possibly against either the New Zealand Kiwis or the Australian Kangaroos. Indonesia is grappling with the aftermath of a tragic dump truck accident in central Java, claiming 11 lives after a collision with a minibus on a steep road. Simultaneously, the nation's economic outlook faces headwinds. Analysts suggest that fiscal constraints, sluggish consumer demand, and the ripple effects of US tariffs may impede President-elect Prabowo Subianto's ambitious economic growth targets, potentially slowing down the overall economic momentum. Fiji is currently engaged in high-level talks with Tonga, with the Fijian Trade Minister Nuku'alofa to foster greater cooperation in trade, agriculture, and aviation. These discussions center on identifying and cultivating new trade and business ventures for both countries. Meanwhile, back in Fiji, local farmers are reporting pressure to sell their produce at unfairly reduced rates. The Netherlands is calling for a critical reassessment of the EU-Israel trade agreement. Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp specifically urged EU diplomat Kaja Kallas to initiate this review. Veldkamp described Israel's ban on aid entering Gaza as catastrophic, truly dismal, arguing it violates international humanitarian law. This call highlights growing concerns within the EU regarding the humanitarian situation in Gaza and its potential implications for trade relations with Israel. The Czech Republic's central bank has implemented another interest rate cut due to lower than expected inflation. Meanwhile, a Czech court temporarily suspended South Korea's $18 billion nuclear reactor project, though South Korean representatives have minimized the impact of this legal challenge. The United States faced scrutiny after the deportation of Daniel Lozano Camargo, a Venezuelan national, to a terrorism confinement facility in El Salvador, WHAM. Lozano Camargo, aged 20, was deported in March despite a pending asylum application and a court order preventing his removal. The Trump administration controversially invoked the Alien Enemies Act in this instance, sparking legal and ethical debates. Shifting focus to El Salvador, the country became the unexpected destination for Lozano Camargo following his deportation from the U.S. He was placed in the CECOT terrorism confinement facility, raising concerns about his treatment and the Salvadoran government's role in accepting him under these circumstances. The facility's conditions and the legal basis for holding Lozano Camargo within it prompted international inquiries. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, the news of Lozano Camargo's deportation and detention reverberated among communities fearing persecution. His case highlighted the challenges faced by Venezuelan asylum seekers and the potential for individuals to be caught between differing national policies and legal systems. The situation amplified existing anxieties about the safety and rights of Venezuelans seeking refuge abroad. The U.S. is reportedly engaging with Rwanda about the possibility of Rwanda hosting deported migrants, following previous failed attempts involving the UK, Israel, and Denmark. Signs of potential easing in a geopolitical standoff emerged as talks occurred in Switzerland, representing the first significant indication of a possible breakthrough. Colombia is considering joining China's Belt and Road Initiative, signaling a possible shift away from its traditional alliance with the United States. Greece and Egypt have reiterated their commitment to developing undersea electricity interconnection to transport renewable energy from North Africa to Europe. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manela successfully weathered a second leadership challenge after a motion of no confidence was withdrawn. Chilean President Gabriel Boric is preparing for his first official visit to Japan, where he will meet with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and tour the World Exposition in Osaka. Speculation has increased regarding a potential arms sale as an Egyptian pilot was seen aboard China's J-10 fighter jet. Mexico City lawmakers have approved a ban on bullfighting, provoking strong reactions from bullfighting supporters. A Singaporean man, Tan Ban Chun, is facing the death penalty in Malaysia after being charged with possessing and trafficking over 10 kilograms of drugs in Johor. In Samoa, there are increasing calls for the police force to be more heavily armed to address the growing problem of gun violence. Cardinals have gathered in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope, the leader of the world's 1.4 billion Roman Catholics, at a time of considerable uncertainty for the Church. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.